Hello, Lizzie here, and today I'm going to show you how to make Orchid, which is one of our new patterns for October. It's a fantastic work caddy, so it's crammed with pockets, outside and inside. The ones on the outside have pleats, so they give, well look, I've got a tube of a can of spray here, so you know it's going to take quite a lot, or it can just take your pens, your clips, those bits and pieces that we tend to sort of want to grab straight away. So, and that's all the way around. So it's more, although it's on a rectangular base, it becomes more of an oval. It's more of a softer shape at the top here. I've used just a soft batting, wadding, but 80-20 cotton wadding I use. You could use some Decaville if you wanted it a little bit stiffer, but actually I quite like it soft. So if we look inside as well, we've got the pockets inside, I don't know if you can see those, and again you've got lots of room for all your bits and pieces, and of course the base I've got full of threads there. It's really a roomy work bag, and it's one of those things that you're going to have next to you with all your things in, so you don't lose anything. It's decorated with a super decorative bias tape. Now you can make your own tape, you can buy decorative tape, you know, create your own with some lace, or just use your plain bias binding. It's fine. It just makes it a nice trim. In fact, it doesn't even need to be bias, it can be just an ordinary binding, but it's a nice finish to it. Can you see how lovely that lace looks at the top of the pocket and the top of the bag? And actually it makes it an easy make when you do that. So let's get going and I'll show you how to make Orchid. Let's pop her, we'll pop her on the floor for the time being. I expect I might need her shortly. So I've done a little bit of prep already. So I'm using this fabulous fabric from Higgs and Higgs, one of my favourite people at the minute, and it's like the mushroom fabric, and I've got a complementary grey and white spot to go for the pockets and the lining, and you'll see soon how it's being put together, how it works, the colourways. I've got my webbing already cut. Now I've used 1 1/4 inch webbing, but you could make your own with the fabric if you want to. All the measurements are inside the pattern, so you can decide whether you're going to make your strapping or whether you're going to buy some webbing. It matters not, it matters not. So the first thing we're going to do is to put the webbing on the outer of the bag. So if I bring Orchid up again, you can see, if I take that out, you can see how the webbing goes right down. So that's the first job that we need to do. So let's pop her back down here again. So if we go on the overhead now, you'll be able to see how I do that. My wadding and my fabric is a little bit wrinkly this time. I think it needs a good press. So what we need to do is to find the places that this webbing is going to go. The first thing we need to do is to find the centre. Now a lot of this you'll find you'll be using the folding and pressing method, so you're getting an idea of where all your lines are going to be. I have got measurements of what to measure and where to place things, but actually sometimes it's easier just to do a fold and nick in the fabric. So if we fold this over, so that's now exactly in half, I'm just going to crease that little part there. Now you can use your pen and mark it, or you can cut a little notch out. So I'll just pop my pen there and mark it. And while we're there, we'll pop that at the top as well, so we know where the top of this is. So I'm just putting my ruler parallel to my fabric, going up the top here and just marking the top. Okay. Now from that centre mark there, we need to measure out 3.5 inches. So let's get my ruler in the right position. And it just so happens it's right on top of the mushroom stalk, so we can hardly see it. But you could again cut a little notch just at that mark there, and we'll do the same at the top, just so we know where we're heading. And just make sure you can see it. And then we'll do the same on the other side. Just move our ruler along, we'll mark that top, and then we'll mark the bottom. Make sure you've got it all nice and straight. And that is our lines that we need to use to put our webbing on. You can see how that works. So What we need are some nice pins to be able to pin this on and keep it straight. So that's the first one. So we're going to, now this webbing has gone right over the top of my mark. Now you're going to not see this, but my mark is here. If I draw it on my mat, my mark is there on the fabric, and my webbing is going straight over the top. So it's right in the centre, just there. Okay, so that's a good thing, so you can see. I don't know if I'll be able to get it out of my worktop, but we'll see. So that's where the first pin goes. And then if we look up to the top here, there's our second mark up here. Again, you can do a notch if you want to. I'm just bringing my webbing up, making sure that it goes over the centre of that mark that we did. So while we've got it just like that, let's put another pin in the middle, just so it doesn't wriggle. And you want to mark down 3/4 of an inch from the top of your webbing, and that's where you're going to do your seam across. So if we just do a nice little mark all the way across, so we can see that, and hopefully you can as well. So when we stitch this, we're going to go from there up to here, across here. You can do a double line of stitching if you want to, and then we're coming down, and we're going to do the same for the other side. So make sure your webbing is all nice and straight, so you're good to go. Let's get all our bits and pieces out of the way. Again, we're going to pop it over the top. Now look, I want you to have a look at this. My webbing was actually it must be a second piece, and it's all marked here, so I'm actually going to make sure I use the correct side, because that side is fine. So all that work we've just done, but it's worth it, isn't it? And if that happens to you, just make sure that the bad side goes to the bag and not facing out. Just keep an eye on that. So again, we'll just pin that, just so we've pinned it in place. Well, did we twist that? Let's have a look. Make sure, yeah. That's because I saw the markings that I did for my 3/4 of an inch. I thought, I haven't turned that. So take it up to the top again. Make sure that top mark that you made is sitting right in the centre of that webbing. And again, get your pen, get your ruler, mark down 3/4 of an inch. Again, we'll draw a line so you can see it clearly. This side as well, 3/4 of an inch. Again, we'll draw a line like that. So now what we've done is, if you can have a look, we're going to stitch from there up to here, across, maybe do a couple of lines if you want to, and back down, up here, across and down. And that's our first bit of stitching done. So just coming back to the machine, just get it in the right place for you. And I'm just going to stitch that webbing. Now don't stitch over your pins. Just make sure you take them out. And just try and keep that webbing straight, and put more pins in if you think you need to. Don't struggle with this. You want them to be nice and straight. So we're up to that line. Take that top pin out, swivel, come across, and then come down the other side of your webbing. And if you want to, put your stitch length up to 3. Although this is structural, you know, it's fine. It's kind of more decorative and structural, isn't it? It's holding the straps in place. But you've got the strength in the amount of stitches you're using. So just whiz along at your own pace. Get up to that 3/4 inch mark, swivel your work around, take your pin out, straight across. And like I say, you can go back if you want to. So I've just done one line of stitching across, but you could go back and come back on yourself just for added strength. Depends how much you're going to carry in it. Like all things crafting, we start off with just a few bits in our bag, and by year 2 it's absolutely full. So there's our first piece done. So we've done our webbing, there's our strap there to hold everything together. And the next thing we need to do is to prepare the outside pockets. So if we look at the one that's partly made, There we go. So we've stitched our webbing in. We now need to prepare the pockets. So I'm going to, then they're stabilised. So I've just used H250, which is a medium weight iron-on stabiliser for the back of the carry-all. It's just like a soft wadding, but like I said, you can use Decaville if you want to. If you're a little bit more structure, then Decaville is very good. Decaville Light. Yeah, so we're going to do the pocket now, and this is lovely because the first thing we're going to do is use the decorative bias binding, but like I said, you can use ordinary binding if you wanted to. Oh, hi there. Thank you for stopping by. I was going to talk to you about the Gold Club actually, and I'm preparing for our Facebook Live tonight because every week on Facebook in the Gold Sewing group, we actually do other things like free motion embroidery tonight. So the Gold Online Sewing Group, what is all that about? Well, if you go to my website, lizzycurtis.com, you'll see the sign up tab. Click on that, you get a choice of membership, but what you do get every month is 2 different super patterns, especially for you. And do you know what? When they go in the shop the next month, they're $4.99 each. So this is an absolute bargain for £5, about $6.20, something like that. You're getting those 2 full patterns with video tutorials as well. So why don't you join up today and join the online sewing group, which is known as the Gold Sewing Group. I'll see you there. Bye. And this has just been stabilised on one side. There's no lining to these pockets. I didn't want too much bulk. I didn't want also for you to use so much fabric. I'm trying to be a little bit more economical with our fabric. So with the bias, all you're going to do is open it up, because this is pre-folded, and you're just going to literally slip it over the edge and cover that raw top edge with your bias or your binding. So let's just get that in place. Get your needle in, and that way you've anchored your piece, and now you can fiddle about with this and make sure that everything is just as you want it to be, but your hands free. You can see here, you know, everything is anchored down. So just open up that binding, pop your top edge in, fold it over, and just machine down. Now, if you're using just regular bias binding or ordinary binding, you might want to do stitch one side and then stitch the other. If you don't feel confident about stitching both sides at the same time, try and keep fairly near to the folded edge so it's nice and neat. But as you're putting the pocket right up to the centre of that binding, if you want to just do a zigzag right down the centre, then you know you're going to catch all those layers. So just coming to the end there, and I haven't trimmed these to size. I'll tell you roughly how much you need, and then I just cut it as I go, just so I don't waste any, and B, it means I don't have lots of pieces that, because some of these are different sizes that we're going to use. So there's our bias binding attached. So when we look at it on the front, you can see it's gorgeous, isn't it? Okay, so now this is where I say to you about using your iron as your friend. I'm going to use my big iron for this. So first of all, we're going to find the centre of our outer pocket. So all you're going to do literally is fold it in half. So fold it in half and press it all the way. I think you'll find as we go along that seam, that folded that you've done, that pressed fold you have done will come in really handy very shortly. So just give that a nice iron, get a nice crease, make sure it's nice and hot so we can see. Yeah, that's lovely. Nice crease. It's going to be important. The only other thing you can do is, now you've got that crease, is to make sure it's cool, get your ruler and your pen and actually draw that line, because when we stitch this onto the bag, we need to stitch up the bag to make the pockets. So if you have a look at the one I've done, you can see that I've stitched from the bottom here up to secure those pockets in the correct intervals all the way along. So that's why I'm saying all of these things are important. So we've done our centre one. So if you look on the overhead, you can see I've done my centre. Now for these two outer lines or creases that we're going to do, you're taking this short edge and you're taking it about a 1/4 inch beyond that line. Okay, so there's your line and this is beyond. So if I move it, you can see there's our line and it's just beyond, because obviously we don't want to count that seam allowance as part of our pockets, because we lose it. So again, a lovely crease here, open it up, and there's a super crease line for us to follow. When that's cooled in a second, I'll put my pen along there so I know exactly where I'm going to stitch. Again, take the other end, I've flipped it as you can see, move that over, cover that centre by that 1/4 inch. You can see it's overlapping. I haven't done that. I haven't done that. If you can see that line going up here, I haven't taken my raw edge to that line. I've taken it over by about a 1/4 inch. Give it a press. There we go. So now that's cooling. I'll draw my line on here. So let's get that in there. That's the thing about heat erasable pens. I think if I take my mat away, it'll help. I've got a line there. I can see that perfectly fine. Flip that around and draw your line. And this is a heat erasable pen, guys. I'm not using a biro or anything like that. So now I've got my 3 lines marked. So if we look on the overhead again, you'll see that we've got the centre one and the 2 outer ones. That's brilliant. So from those lines there, we now need to mark out a 1/2 inch. So if we bring the ruler in, and again, if you get real close in here, you'll be able to see what I'm doing. So there is my inch mark. So I'm going to mark a 1/2 inch here and a 1/2 inch there. Okay, and then if we move that along, again, I put my line on the 1/2 inch mark of my ruler and 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch. So that's 1 pocket, 2 pockets. This is the 3rd pocket. We're going to mark a 1/2 inch and a 1/2 inch. Okay. The ideal thing now is to actually crease these. So we do an inverted pleat. Now all that means is, I want you to get in close here, is that this line here that you've made is going to go to that centre line there. So that goes to that and that goes to that, which gives you a 1/4 inch inverted pleat. So it's not difficult, you just got to think it through. So let me turn it so it's better for me. So give it a little squidge, get a crease and take it into the centre. It's quite a small bit and you wonder why it's worth it, but it really is. And you can see now that's the sort of look you want. So if you've come in real close, you can see. And then, so that's one done, and then we need to do the same with that. So give it a little pinch, give it a squidge, so you've got a fold, and then bring that to the centre as well. So it's only a 1/4 inch, it's not much. So be aware that it's not much, but it's enough to make a really nice pocket. If we bring in the one that I've already done, you can see what a difference it makes. It's quite noticeable now, isn't it? Now you've done all 3, you can see how that looks. So the best thing we can do now is to actually run our machine over all of those pleats. Now you could, if you wanted to, pop your pins in, and each one of those pleats could have a pin in just to hold that in place, or a clip, but once you've creased that, you'll find that it's got kind of like a memory to it. You won't need to do much else other than pop it under the machine, or you can crease as you go if you feel brave enough. So let's just bring the machine in. Okay, so I'm just going to pop this under the needle and just sort of go for it, really, because I've got my creases, so I'm more than happy with what I've done. if you've got that needle down facility, this is a great time to use it, because as you're folding that fabric and creasing it, then the needle will hold that work for you. So just stitch that little bit there. You can see how that looks on the camera. That's literally all it is. Then we come to the next one. So I'm just going to get that first pleat done and try and get them straight. So the edges of the pleat are parallel to the edge of the fabric there. And again, just pleat that one forward. A bit more. There we are. So you can see how that's starting to look if I bring that down. And don't worry about what anything else of the rest of this is doing. If you think, oh, that's creased wrong, please don't worry about that, because we don't actually press those pleats in. They get naturally folded because of the H250. They will naturally want to fold and crease, but you're not to press them in. I don't think that looks, well, it's up to you. I don't think it looks that attractive. So there we are. So if I show you the camera, you can see what that looks like. Now when you come to this end here, each short end, as we stitch them onto the bag front, you're going to pleat just about the same, about 1/4 inch, and about 3/8 of an inch before that seam. So, but we're not going to measure it, you're just going to fit it as you go. So you're going to do something along that lines like that. And that gives you the side pocket to the bag. And you'll see that as we go along. So let's pop this on to the bag front. So if we go on the overhead, we'll be able to see how that works. We need to stitch those lines going up to the top, as we talked about before, but I think the first thing we need to do is to actually get this onto the bag. So if we match up our corners, well, we match up the middle first. I think that's your best bet. Match up the middle first, pop a pin in. And because we've got that pleat, you might want to pop 2 in so it's actually sits straight like that. Okay, that's sitting nice and straight. And then all you're going to do is move that along. Again, pop a pin in, pop 2 in. And the pleat, so the inverted pleat, should just be the other side of your webbing. So if you look at it, you can see it's just the other side of it. Okay, and that's where you're going to use your line to follow, to stitch up to make sure that's nice and straight. And again, with this one here. So same on this side, so just bring it along, pop your pleat in, or not pop your pleat in, pin your pleat. And I like to do it both sides, otherwise you could go a little bit wriggly with it. So that's all my 6 pins in place. And you'll see when you bring the short end up to the outer, you've got a natural pocket being evolved here, but as we stitch down, you can see this doesn't fit, intentional, because we're going to do that pleat just before that pocket ends, or the ends of the actual bag. So if I do that, it's about 1/4 inch. So if I was to, let's try and do it so you can see. So if I bring my corners together, so make sure those corners are together, and then you're just pleating that over, because it's got stabilizer in it. It really has got a mind of its own. So about 3/8 of an inch before the end of your seam there, you're going to do a pleat. And actually, it's easier to do it as you're stitching along than trying to do it now. So again, if we go up the other end here, match up our corners just like that. And you can pin this so it all, it holds everything in place. Don't do what I do. What do they say? Do as I say, not as I do. I've got my corners sitting on top of each other. And then what I'm going to do is pleat that over. So it kind of does it itself. And just make sure that you've got a nice straight edge there, a nice sort of sitting on top of each other. There we go. So look, that's beautiful now. So that's all we're doing. That was all we're doing, and that will give us a lovely pleat in our pocket that goes around the side of the bag. So there we are, so that's done. I haven't pinned that side, but you can see how that looks. Now you can stitch that now. I would say stitch that now because you've got all these pins there, but after that we need to now straighten this up, and we need to get this line stitched so it stitches our pockets in place. Okay, so we'll do this bit first and then we'll stitch up these lines here. Okay, let me just turn my iron off. There we go. It's making lots of steamy noises and it shouldn't do. So just start at one side, so right sides together, pop it under the machine, and obviously, like I said, you're going to pin this so it's all nice and accurate, and you're stitching about 1/8 of an inch because we're just basting down to the corner and flip it. I'll take my pins out as I go, bring my little mouse in, and like I say, just get that end pleat nice and straight, and then you're just zooming along, and all we're doing is basting all of these layers together. So you can see it's really worth doing the pinning. And then as we come down to the other end, I'll just take all these pins out. I like to be able to manipulate the fabric myself. You just need to make sure that all your raw edges are sitting on top of each other. Everything is super duper neat. Up to the corner, and then we go up the side of the bag. Just make sure all your fabric is sitting on top of each other. There we are. So that's that little bit done. So now all we're going to do is going to go up the pockets. Now this is where you might want to just pin the top. If you can pin the top, then you know everything else is straight. So we'll do the centre one first. If we go on the overhead, and like I said, these pleats will just really want to sort of almost get in your way. But you've got your centre line here. When we first started, we made a little mark here, and there's our mark there. So what you can do is bring your ruler in, get that parallel to this edge here, and then just make sure that that centre line of your pocket is sitting absolutely on top, and then pin it. And then if you've got all your layers nice and straight, you'll be able to machine all the way up from the bottom to the top. No bother at all. Just make sure all my layers are sitting nicely on top of each other. There we go, that's better. And just give it a pin. And we're going to stitch on that line. There we go. It's easier when it's an inverted, like the others on the outside. This is because this was pressed like a mountain fold. It doesn't want to sit down. The others will. So again, with the outer pieces, all we're going to do is line up the outside. So because our webbing is lovely, obviously lovely and straight, we just put it on. We're just following the line of the webbing. And again, we'll just pin that at the top, and we've got that line to follow from the bottom up to the top. And just make sure that's sitting nice and straight, like that. So if that's our line there, if that line is over the top of the webbing, then you know you're too far over. If you've come this way and it's going off at a slant and you're too far away from the webbing, again, you know you need to adjust it. So you know the distance between the centre of that pleat to the edge of that webbing. So do the same on this end. And again with this one, so you can see where you are, you can see where your webbing is. Follow the line of that webbing up with your eye. Have a look at the other side and make sure it balances with that. Pin so you know where you're aiming for. You've got the line that you've drawn. Now because we've done this pleat here, as you start off you will have to open that pleat up to get your needle in and your foot to follow that line. You don't want to be stitching any of these pleats down, so you need to get up the centre of that. So let's pop it under the machine. Now you could start from the bottom up to the top and then come back down to do a double line, or you can just go up to the top and do a back stitch, which is all I'll do. So up to the top. And if you're not confident with this at all, then please put more pins in to hold these pockets straight. So there's one. So pop your needle in so everything is being held in place. Just pull it straight, get those pleats out of the way. Make sure you're all lined up beautifully. Follow the line that you've drawn up to the top. And there we are, second pocket done. So needle down in between the pleats there. You'll see your pen mark, so you know you won't go wrong. Take a little time, get it nice and straight. Just move that fabric if it gets in the way. If you find it easier, I'm just thinking this through, if you find it easier, you might want to do this part first and then pleat your fabric at the bottom. So do this bit first so you think that's nice and straight, and then do your pleats here, and then you'll know that you've got your line absolutely perfect. So there's our second half done. See how easy it comes together? Now this is where there's so many different ways to finish off a bag. On this one, this is the base. I've used some Decaville Light and I've used wadding. So underneath there, I don't know if I can peel that back. Yeah, I've got some Decaville Light, which is it's more than a medium weight. It's a really it's quite structural and it's perfect for the bottom of bags. So I've got my Decaville Light and I've got wadding as well, so it's nice and squidgy inside the bag. Although the lining isn't stabilized at all, you will feel this on the inside of the bag. It's actually quite nice. And this, like I say, this is your base. Be aware of directional fabrics. You can see obviously mine is directional, so you just got to decide whether you need the mushrooms going across or down. I don't think it really matters with the base, but obviously you'd need to be careful for the bag pieces. So now I have a particular way of putting some bags together, not all my bags, but this one in particular. So what I want you to do, I want you to find the middles of the long sides and the short sides. Okay, so fold your base in half and just squish them together so they're nice and flat, so you know that's definitely in the middle, and cut yourself a little notch. So again, just fold it in half for the other side, make sure it's absolutely square on, cut yourself a notch. Do the same for your short ends, so short ends together, whoops, cut yourself a little notch. Because when we start stitching these pieces together, because I don't have sides and long sides and short sides to put into the boxy bottom, it has to be done in one piece, and I have got a way of doing that, and we've done that before. Okay, so now we've got all our centres marked, so we've got our centre notches on all four sides. So what I suggest you do is to find the centre of your bag body and match those up, so you know that is absolutely perfect. So we'll pop a pin in. You know I don't like pins, but I will pop a pin in. Okay, so we know that that is now right in the centre, exactly where it should be. When it comes to coming around the edges, obviously this side here of the bag is going to curl around, and you'll need to snip in to that body bag to actually be able to turn it around. So when we come to do this and stitching this together, you're going to start about a ½ inch in from the side of your from the side of your bag. So if we look on the overhead, if we see this bit here, This is the centre of the sides. This is the side here. This is going to curl around and become the centre of your side. So this part matches to that. But when we stitch it together, I want you to start stitching about a ½ inch from the edge of this end here. So this notch will go exactly on the ½ inch in. So let me just draw that line, because that's your stitch line, that's your seam line. So let's draw a nice line so you can see it. You could join the two pieces together, but actually it's a little bit cumbersome, so I would suggest this way. So this notch actually sits right on top of that blue line that I've just drawn. Do you see that line there? And that notch sits right on top of that. It doesn't sit on the raw edges, it sits on that blue line, your seam line. And we're going to start stitching about a ½ inch away from that. So if I was to mark that again, it's going to be about here. Okay. So if I pop that down, and I can pop a pin in there if I want to, but I tend not to with this. And you'll see that all of this fits. We need to cut a little notch or a little snip out of this part to enable us to go around the corner, but I'll talk about that as we get to it. I tend to do one half and then I do the other half. So I really want you to understand that the notch that we've cut goes on the ½ inch seam line, and then we're going to start stitching, or we're going to finish stitching, start or finish, on this ½ inch mark here. Okay, and that gives us then an option when we put the two side seams together to adjust if we need to. I hope that makes sense. So we're going to start from the middle, as I find if I've got my middle correct, I'm a happy bunny. So I start from the middle, and like I said, there's lots of different ways, lots of different designers do different things, but sometimes this is the way I sometimes do it. So I'm stitching where I've got the base on the top and the bag body on the bottom. You could start the other way round, it's probably easier. Well, let's stick to how we're doing it now for the time being. So, and actually from the overhead you can see how that looks really well. And you know that this notch is going to come down here. So, ½ inch seam allowance. And when we make sure your stitch length is on about 2 or 2.5. Well, I would suggest 2 because this is structural. So when we come to this ½ inch away from the end of our seam here, so it's not, if I swivel this around so you can see on the side camera, look, I've got this edge of the fabric here that I haven't stitched, so I've stopped a ½ inch away, and I want to snip into my body bag, not the bottom, the base part, just the body bag, and I'm going to snip in at a 45-degree angle. And this is what I'm saying, it might be easier if you do this with the body of the bag on the top. So I'm swiveling that around, and as I do, because I've notched it, because I've cut into that corner, that will all move. And just make sure that your base stays square, okay? Doesn't matter what's going on underneath. I would do a little back stitch just to make that really secure, and then you're just coming up, and like I say, you're going to stop about a ½ inch away from the end of your body bag. I must find a different term. The bag, the bag body. So we're going to finish, ignore the base, we're going to finish ½ inch away from that raw edge of your body. There we go. So if I show you on the side here, I want you to have a look. We've come along here, and we've come up there, and we've finished about a ½ inch away from the seam. Can you see how that looks? Yep, hopefully. Right, so we're going to repeat that on the other side. So flip it over, go back to the middle, little back stitch to start. We're coming up the bag, we're going to stop 1/4 inch away from the corner of your base, needle up. We're going to snip in a 45-degree angle, or you could do straight across, as long as you've got a snip in there to be able to turn that base nicely. And you really need a pair of scissors that cuts right to the tip now, guys, which these aren't too bad. And while that needle is still in the fabric, I'm just going to swivel everything around, and this top part gets shifted around. So you're moving it, you're keeping your base straight, your base is still straight here, but you've shifted this bag around. It kind of, I suppose it goes on a 45 degree. I'm going to do some back stitches there just to make sure I've got security. And I'm going to stop about 1/2 inch from the end of my bag piece. So there we are. You can see that more easily now. And that swivels lovely on that corner there, but just make sure you put in some really secure stitches. So that's the first half done. So let's do the second half. So again, you're matching up the centre of your bag to that centre notch, and you're going to pin it if you need to. 1/4 inch seam allowance, coming down along the long part of your base. You're going to stop 1/4 inch away. Let me just cut that so I can see it. You're going to stop 1/4 inch away. You're going to lift up your presser foot. You're going to keep your needle in, swivel everything around, and because we've snipped in, it really swivels beautifully. Foot down again, a lovely couple of back stitches just to secure that corner. And then, like I said, as before, we're going to stop about 1/2 inch before the end of our fabric. You want to be before the notch, so don't go anywhere near the notch. And if I bring that to the camera at the front, the side here, I want you to see, I want to make sure I'm showing you properly, that you've got those two edges there of your body piece. And if you look inside there, just make sure I can do that so I can show you properly. There's the notch, and I haven't gone anywhere near the notch. Okay, so you've got the two side pieces. There's the base there, ready to stitch together. You can, that's a really good shot of how that looks. And it means that if your bag pieces don't fit properly, I always think it's a great idea. It's like when sewing bases, round bases onto bags. It's a good idea to do it like this because we're all different with our stitching, aren't we? Okay, so now we just need to stitch the other side. We'll start from the middle again, because you know that's correct. Come along the long edge of your base. I'm just going to snip into my bag base because I can see where I'm going to come up to that. But you don't want to be cutting 1/4 inch. You want to be cutting, well, not quite 1/4 inch, but a little bit more than 1/8 inch. Right, so we've got our needle in. I'm going to swivel my base, but I'm also going to twist this body piece underneath so it becomes straight. Put my foot down, nice little back stitch just to hold that, and then I'm going to stitch along, but stopping 1/2 inch again before the raw edges. And like I say, don't go as far as the notches. Okay, so sounds a bit complicated, doesn't it? But actually it's a great way of putting a base on, because it means that you've got the flexibility of these side seams. So you can see how that looks. There's the base on, there's our side seams there. Could do with gluing my wadding down a bit better. So now all we need to do is make sure that our side seams go together beautifully. So what you're doing is you're judging how much seam allowance that you're going to give yourself to make that fit beautifully. And like I said, you can join these body pieces together, the body of the bag together, and then fit the whole thing on in one go. And that's fine, that's perfectly fine. I just find that a little bit clumsy. I find it difficult to manage all the bits. I find it much easier to do half and then do the second half. That's just me. You probably will join them together and do it your way. So now what we're going to do is to match up these side seams, and it's going to be about 3/8 of an inch of a seam. So I'm just going to do that from top to bottom, and then I'll stitch across here to finish that off. So bring your tops of your sides really nicely and neatly together. And for me, it's going to be about 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, just make sure, you know, the top of your bias hopefully will sit nicely together. Try and make sure it does. And try not, you know, where we did the pleats just before the side seams, just make sure you don't catch any of that. And I think you'll feel it. So just come down your sides. Let's get that lined up. There we go. Okay, so that's one side seam done. So I'm just going to finish off that edge there, and you open up your seams if you want to, if you find that easier for you. So if I was to open that up, there we go. I'm trying to finger press it as I'm showing you. So if you just open it up, it looks neat, doesn't it? Might want to press that open with your iron now, or finger press it, either or. So just do the other end. So again, just bring them together, make sure the tops meet, because we're going to put that bias trim on, and you can see the seams already want to sit together. So just pinch them, have a look at it. It's about 3/8 of an inch again, and you could start stitching from the base here, or you could start stitching from the top, whatever is easier for you. Nice little back stitch there. Get your seams to match, and don't forget, yeah, the bias tape would sit nicely on top of each other. You might want to pin this or use your quilting clips to hold everything in place. There we go, and open this up, flatten out your seams, so you can open your seams up like that, like we did all the way along the other side, and then just stitch that little gap there so you know that's nice and secure. Let's just make sure that's open. Okay, so there is our side seams done. Like I say, you can get the iron on that now if you want and press those open, make that really neat. I don't think it really makes a huge difference, but there's quite a bit of fabric going on, especially with the bias tape, so you might want to just sort of distribute the thickness of the fabric. Okay, so that's our outer piece done. So let's just turn it through so we get an idea of what we're looking at. I love the colours of this. So there's our outer done, and give it a good press. This is such a great time to give it a press. There we go, make sure it's all sitting nicely. So let's pop that to one side. So now we need to do the lining, and the lining is really just as easy as the outer. In fact, it's probably easier because we don't put, these are my pockets are the inside to match, and I'm using the grey as the main lining. So with this, it's actually easier because we don't have any pleats. These are flat pockets. There's no stabiliser on these, but you can if you want to. So to decorate the top, now you can either turn down a quarter of an inch again and top stitch, but it doesn't make a very big pocket. Or again, I'm using my decorative bias tape. Make sure if you're using directional fabric, we're on the you know, it's going the right way, and just pop your In fact, I'll do it from the right side so I can see. If your top stitching is a bit dodgy, always do it from the right side. And you're just sandwiching the top of the raw edge, the long raw edge, into your bias tape. It's a really quick way and a very pretty way of finishing off the top edge, a raw edge, where we're not neatening it in any other way. But I mean, all of these pockets could be lined if you want to, if you feel that you want to line them. And you could just literally pop 2 pieces of fabric wrong sides together and then put your binding on. That would look so lovely. But you know, sometimes it depends what it is that you're making as to how much fabric and work you're going to put into something. And I'd like to think that all of these pieces that we've been making over the last couple of months are definitely to be used, because all of these patterns follow on from last month's patterns. So we're looking at storage solutions for your crafting area. So all I'm doing, I'm chain piecing now. I've got the second pocket sitting, waiting now to be stitched. So let's get that done. And we're going to use the same technique as we did before with finding the centre. In fact, let's switch the yarn on so we're ready. Not too hot. There we go. So using the folds of the fabric, we're using those to stitch. Ooh. It's going crazy over there. To stitch the folds to make the pockets. It's as easy as that. You can measure if you want to, but I find that just as efficient. Using the tools that we have in our craft room, why not? Okay, so that's my second piece done. We'll need our bias tape to join the 2 pieces together. Let's just snip my threads there. Right, so if we go on the overhead, you'll be able to see how I do this. And again, it's just a repeat of what we did before. Just make sure, I think my iron is a bit drippy this morning. So there's my fabric. So sorry, I'll show you on the front camera first. There's the fabric, there's the pockets on the inside with the decorative bias trim. So on the overhead. Okay, so we've folded it in half. Gonna get the iron, hopefully it's not going to be too drippy, and we're making our crease. And if you remember before, I found that the mountain fold, if you like, is quite difficult to machine down because it's going sort of like a tent. I can't do this with my hands in the camera, but it's an up crease here, which is not that easy to follow. So you might find it easier to do this way, where you're putting an inverted fold in. Okay, sorry, I've got drippy water all over this now. So that's much easier to stitch than going the other way. So we're going to do the same again. We're going to fold our fabric so the raw edge of the short edge goes over the top by 1/4 inch. And don't just iron out the crease you've just done. So you can see, there's my second crease, there's my first crease, and that's gone over there by 1/4 inch. So again with this one, there's my line. It goes over by, I mean, don't measure it, just do it by eye. Again, put your crease in there. Got drippy water on everything now. So you've got your 3 creases, that all helps. So we'll do the same again. Sorry, that's it. So we'll do our right sides together, do a nice crease, open it up. See, that's a lovely crease to follow now. bring that over just 1/4 of an inch, right sides together, and I'll just flip that over, fold that over 1/4 of an inch. So the 1/4 inch is over the top of that center fold. You can see it's 1/4 inch over. So that gives us 3 beautiful crease lines to stitch onto our bag. So let's get the bag in while you're still there. This is our lining, and this goes directly over the top. You can see how that works. Okay, and if we get the pins in, oh, that's a bent one, put that in the bin. Just pin at strategic points, just holding everything in place. Make sure you pin up here, and on the sides. Okay, so let's quickly do the other. So that's now ready to stitch, so let's do the other one. So you can see by doing those creases how useful they are in your pocket placement. So again, using the pins really helps to keep everything in its place. There we go. And it just makes it a quick stitch then. They'll just fly together. And once this is all stitched, you might want to trim all these side pieces so they're all, everything is absolutely perfect, because I can see that's just overhanging a little bit there, but I'll not do anything with it just yet. So there's our pockets pinned in place. So now we're going to baste this all the way around. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from here. I'm going to start from here, come down, go across, up, down, across, up, down, across, up, down, across and up. That's exactly how I will stitch it. So let's bring in the machine, and we'll start at that top piece there. So I start about 1/2 inch from the top of that bias tape. Let's bring in the mouse. Make sure you are stitching 2 layers. I know that was a little bit out. That's my cutting. Along the bottom, take the pin out as you get to it. I've got to come up to the crease line now. So I'm just going to swivel, follow the crease line, up to the top, swivel, come down, follow your stitches if you can, it makes it nice and neat. If you can't, don't worry. In fact, if you can't follow your stitches, I'd make it deliberate. I would stitch 1/8 of an inch away, so it looks deliberate. Now, where's my crease? There, I think we're there. I'd lost some of that crease line, I think. So, up to the top. And just pivot. Doing it this way saves you breaking your thread. Makes it a quick sew as well. I mean, the lining is just as important as the outer. It's not so technically challenging. Up to the top, swivel. I wouldn't go any further than your tape. And you're doing 1/8 of an inch basting line. Okay. So there is our pockets installed. You can see, perfect. So we just need to do the other one now. there's our second pocket done. So we're all done. We've got our two sides ready to go into our base. So as before with your base, find your centres of the long sides and the short sides, and we're just going to repeat what we did for the outside. So if you didn't quite understand the first time, we're going to do it again. The only thing I would stress to you is, because we're snipping into the body part of the bag, I would just make sure you reinforce those corners. If the bag was made in a different way, if the bag was made in, the sides were made into four parts, 2 long sides, 2 short sides, you wouldn't have to think about that. But this is slightly different. So I found the centres of my long and short sides, so I'm going to pop the centre of my bag to the centre of my first notch, right sides together, and that's where I'm going to start stitching. So just as we did before, 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm coming down the long side of the base, and I'm going to stop 1/4 inch from the end. I'm going to get my nice sharp scissors. I wonder if these might be better actually. And I'm just going to snip into that corner. Now you can do a 45 degree, or you can just go straight. So if that's your rectangle, you can go like that or like that. So 1/4 inch. So I'm going to swivel the top fabric, swivel the bottom fabric, so they become parallel along that short edge. Again, I'm going to do a little back stitch just to secure that corner and make it really strong, and I'm going to stop 1/2 inch from the end of my fabric, and it's the 1/2 inch is on the body part of the bag, not the rectangle base. We're ignoring the fact that it's a base. This is all the important part. So I'm stopping 1/2 inch away from that short edge of the outer, the body, not the outer body, it's the lining body, but it's the same thing. So again, start from the middle, come down that long edge of the lining. Before I get to it, I'm just going to cut into my base, not into the base, into the bag. That's it. One more. And then I'm going to keep my needle in, I'm going to pivot everything. So everything then turns around the corner, and all my edges are then parallel to each other. Just give it a little wriggle if it doesn't want to go. That's it. Again, a little back stitch just to make that corner really secure. And like I said before, you're going to stop 1/2 inch from the end of your fabric. There we go. So our 2 seams look like that. So we're going to do the same again. Right sides together. You're going to start with that centre seam first. So it's the notch on your base and the centre seam of your middle pocket. So there's the side there, and you've got a nice play of fabric here. I can get hold of it. There we go. So there's your piece there, and you've got a nice big seam. Again, it's about 3/8 of an inch. So we'll just come down the other side. Turn everything so everything becomes parallel. There's little corners you might want to just flick out. If you've got a stiletto, it's really handy for making sure that those little corner pieces of the base stick out properly. Okay, so there's all our lining attached apart from the side seams. So what I would do now is just to match those side seams up, make sure they're going to meet nicely and neatly, and I always pinch them and look at my seam allowance. It's about 3/8 of an inch. Stitch up the sides and be consistent, so that whatever you've pinched in, then you just all the way up to the top. So there's the first side done. Don't forget to finish the base off. So again, open up that seam, make it flat, sits better, and then just sew your gap closed. So that's what it should look like. So again, just pinch those edges together, make sure they're going to fit. So it's about 3/8 of an inch. So it's the same for both. Try and get your bias tape to sit nicely on top of each other. Don't forget to finish that little seam off there, because we left a little gap, didn't we? Open up your seam that you've just stitched. Start about a 1/2 inch away, so you've got a nice strong finish. And there we are. That's the other end, and if you want to, get your iron and open that seam up all the way along, just as we did with the outer. Okay, so that's our lining done. So with the right side still inside from where we stitched it together, just pop it inside the main bag, so you've got your right sides facing out, because we finish it off with the decorative tape. This is what makes this so easy to make. There's no turning gap to close. It's all done with the tape. So just clip your side seams together, and that way you know you've got it lined up. And if you've pressed your seams open, it'll make it much easier. And then once those two side seams together, just give that a little flick like that, and that will actually bring all the fabrics together really nicely. And to be honest, you can pin this, use your quilting clips, clip it, just make sure all of your layers are sitting nicely together, and then we're just going to put the binding tape on, and then it's done. So look how easy that is. So lots of nice binding tape, and we're just going to start off with the raw edge. When we finish it off at the end, we're going to open this tape up, we're going to fold it in, and then do a neat finish. And you can start at a side seam if you want to. Just make sure some of these threads are cut. So you're just literally encasing those top seams into the center of that binding. So once again, you're opening that binding up, you're popping it over the top of both layers, and then you're stitching it together. So let's just bring the machine in. If you've got a free arm, great. This is really helpful. And it's the first couple of stitches, so you might want to pin this in place. But I always find my needle is like my third hand, so once I've got my needle into the work, I'm happy, and I just carry on. So both of those top raw edges get tucked into your binding. You can increase the stitch length if you want to. And so we work our way around getting the edges lined up. You might want to baste those edges together first. That might be a good option. I'm doing this obviously unbasted, otherwise I would have shown you. And then of course you're only dealing with almost like one piece of fabric then, aren't you? I quite like that idea. I'm opening up the bias and popping the two raw edges into the center, right up to the fold, and just slowly working my way around. And this whole project would really benefit from a really good press. It's like anything else we do. So we're nearly back to where we started. Keep shifting all the fabric around. Do you see, with the wadding, it's nice and soft, it's lovely and malleable, and it's really behaving. If you used like style foam, you know, like a Bosal, then it's a little bit more clumsy, but it gives a good result. Again, Decaville is quite stiff and unyielding, but again, it would give a good result. So if you can manage it. So we're just coming back to where we started. And all we're going to do with the, just get some of these threads cut. All we're going to do, gosh, there we are. If we look on the side there, all we're going to do is open up our bias, open it up, fold it back on itself. So you've got a folded edge. If I do it that way, you might be able to see. Let's do it like that. There you go. Got a folded edge, and you're just literally going over the top of what you started with, and hopefully it'll all sit nicely. I would use a stiletto now to actually hold all those layers together. If you do miss some of the layers because it's a little bit more bulky, then just stitch it again. Just go in there and stitch it again. So let's just try and get that end behaving. Still doesn't want to behave, but we'll give it our best shot. And this is where, I wish I got my stiletto now, I'll use the point of my scissors. And this is where I would go more to the centre than the edge of my tape. I would just take it in a little bit. I'll show you when I've done it. I could have done a better job, but I'll show you what I've done. Do you see I've gone into the centre? I would have, that little edge there, I'd have tucked in a bit better, but I've gone more into the centre of my tape, because what that means is, let me just cut these little ends off here. What that means is I've definitely caught it on the other side, and I must admit I would have liked to have tucked that in, but you get the gist, that when you come along to the end, just go stitch more to the centre of your tape than the edge. That way you catch everything. And I might adjust that later, or I might not. Sometimes we have to remember this is a work bag, and there's only a certain amount of work perhaps you want to do. Right, this, like I say, could do with a good press, but there is our bag made. Isn't that absolutely glorious? So there's one or two little tricky bits. Not much. You've got the side pockets. Do you see how that, because we've used just two pieces, we haven't got that square look, which I didn't want with this. I wanted it to be soft and curvy. I wanted it to look nice. I wanted to have extra pockets here. Well, we couldn't have done that if we'd had squared off ends. Well, we could have done, but I just love the fact that we've got equal pockets going all the way around. Can you see how that looks? And obviously inside as well, got all the pockets inside. So with a good press, that will look amazing. Another top tip, actually, while I remember, another top tip, if you want the inside of your bag to sit, because sometimes the lining a bit scrunches up a little bit inside, I would take about 3/8 of an inch, perhaps even half an inch off my top of my lining. So it's almost like the lining is hanging inside the bag, but it will sit better. We haven't done that yet, but that is quite a good top tip. So there we are. So there's our lovely Orchid. She's absolutely glorious. I hope you love making her. She's going to be so useful to take away on workshops, days away, maybe just to the side of you on a table, so everything can go in there. And I have to tell you that so much can go in there. I mean, I haven't filled mine, but you can see You can see the yellow and grey theme going on. I've got some of my embroidery threads in there, but you could absolutely stuff it with things. So there we are, we've got 2 now. How fabulous is that? So there's Orchid. I hope you enjoy her, and I hope you make loads.